I will now invite my colleague, Mr. Richard Carter, to lead us in a word of prayer.
Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the blessings that we enjoy. We ask for your guidance, your direction, your protection. We ask that you will support us as we come to discuss, to deliberate, to contemplate on a better future for our land, to support the idea of all of us coming together to make decisions in our own interests, to take matters into consideration to improve the quality of the life that we enjoy. We ask for your blessing on those who are gathered here today. Those who are on their way, we ask that you will bring them safely. We thank you for the ability to live in a country that allows us the freedom of association, the ability to consider, to contemplate, to deliberate. To do this in the freedom and with the knowledge that it's all done to the honor and glory of your name. Bless these proceedings, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good night again, everyone. I would like to, at this time, to acknowledge the presence of our Deputy Chair, His Excellency David Comachon, the Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM. And I'd like to welcome all the members of St. Lucie who've made the effort to be here for this town hall this evening. We appreciate your presence, and we hope that tonight will be a very engaging conversation as we're here to share our ideas as to what the Thorne Commission on Local Governance will look like, and we invite your feedback, your questions, your queries, and your suggestions. I would like to first give a brief introduction as to the proposal for the People's Assemblies, and the purpose would be to improve accountability and governance, to engage people participation, establish high standards in the public service, contribute creativity, intelligence, and energy to public affairs administration, deliver critical service to communities, protect neighborhood welfare, participate in collective decision-making and administrative activities that are designed to foster social and national unity. If any of these areas interest you, then this is the right place. I'd also like to take at this time to welcome those who are tuned in on social media. Please know that you are free to share the feed to all of your members who may not have been able to come out tonight but are listening in. We are proposing for the parish of St. Lucie to have at least one People's Assembly at this time. However, as we would have mentioned, we welcome your suggestions if you believe that this may not be adequate or if it may be overkill. We'd also like to, at this time, share some questions that we have for you, where you may also be able to give your input as to what your opinion is for these particular areas. Do you support a system of local government in Barbados? Do you support the proposal that each assembly must be non-partisan? Do you support the proposal for each assembly to comprise 30 persons? What do you think should be the minimum age for membership on a People's Assembly? Do you support the proposal that each assembly should comprise a mix of elected private persons who live in the geographical area, together with persons nominated from specific departments within the public service? Do you think that the nominated public servant should sit on the assembly in his or her capacity as a public servant? Noting that each assembly may cover more than one constituency, what do you think ought to be the relationship, if any, between the People's Assembly and the parliamentary representative? Should sessions of the Assembly be generally conducted in public? And finally, when would you wish to see a system of local government implemented in Barbados? My name is Crystal Howell. I'm a member of the Thorne Commission of Local Governance. To my left is Adrian Donovan, and to my right is Peter Skeet. Apologies. And Richard Carter. We are all members of the Thorne Commission on Local Governance. I'd like to apologize on behalf of my colleagues who are unable to make it tonight due to various other commitments. We welcome your questions and feedback at this time. And you're not limited to the ones that I would have just shared with you. I know it was a lot to take in, so you can take your time and you can think about the questions, and if there are any that you would have had that you would like to also add, or any that my colleagues on my left or right would also like to share.
Okay, well, members of the audience and the gathering here, the consultation group are thinking about what questions or issues they might want to pose. I'll just offer a couple of ideas for your additional consideration. This is really a unique opportunity and a unique time in the history of Barbados. Not that we have not had forms of local governance or local government before, we have, but at this juncture in our history, to have a situation where it is being presented as an idea with a number of suggestions to the people of Barbados for them to make the determination themselves as to what shape the People's Assembly should take. That in itself is unique because generally speaking in our history, the people have been told what form any governance arrangement would take as opposed to having the opportunity to shape, to contribute to, and to help to determine what that form of governance should be. Although a number of ideas are put forward, they're put forward as ideas for discussion, consideration, and feedback, because it would hardly make sense for us as members of the Commission to have determined what shape the People's Assembly should take and simply come to yourselves as members of the public to simply rubber stamp this. So this is an opportunity for you to shape what will, we hope and expect, become an opportunity for us to take greater charge, greater responsibility for affairs that directly impact on us, to have a greater say in the services that are delivered by the government to satisfy the particular social, economic, and political needs that we have, to have an opportunity to determine how these assemblies should be constituted, what should be the breadth and scope of their consideration. All of these are matters that are open for your consideration and for your input. So we want to urge you to take advantage of the opportunity. The plan is to take this across Barbados, to consult as broadly as possible in fora such as this, and of course, as the chair said, through social media as well. There is the scope for participation through social media. To put to the people of Barbados the idea of these 20 people's assemblies, get their feedback, and eventually to present this to the government of Barbados for formal ratification through the House of Assembly and essentially passage into whatever legislative support might be required to give effect to it. I look forward now in my 7th decade to being part of something that has not been a feature of my existence since I've been here in Barbados, an opportunity for greater and deeper participation in matters that affect my own life. And the members of the commission, I'm sure, those who are here and those who are not able to be here, I look forward to compiling the results of all of this consultation across the island, and to then come back to the people once all of the consultations have been done with a consolidation of all of the ideas before it is presented to the government of Barbados. So that is a bit of kind of background history and a bit of a forward look in terms of where we are proposing to go with this. Hopefully that has given you enough time to formulate some of your questions and ideas that you might want to put either to us or put even to your fellow members of the community who are gathered here.
Well, in backing some of the things to which Mr. Carter would have said, we've come to a parish that, of course, has very strong community links. We know from the community independence celebration that St. Lucie is a very vibrant parish, and it presents an opportunity for, as Mr. Carter would say, for local communities to have a greater say in the delivery of services to the communities in which you love and you have a direct responsibility for. And critical to these consultations and the direction to which the government hopes to take governance is the fact that these assemblies must be viewed as non-partisan. You are elected to these assemblies not on the basis of a political party to which you might support, but your love for your community. We see this as a non-partisan approach to community governance, and it presents a wonderful opportunity, as I said, for people at the community level, whether you're old, whether you're young, to have greater say in determining how your affairs and how services are delivered right into the heart of the communities in which you live. And we are here to offer some guidance. We are here to get input from you, and as a way and means of how these assemblies are to be shaped. And as we travel through the length and breadth of Barbados, we are encouraging residents to come out and hear what is being proposed, and make a very significant input into the shape of these 20 people's assemblies that are being proposed.
I would just like to take at this time to acknowledge Attorney at Law and Member of Parliament for Christchurch South, Mr. Ralph Thorne. He is the chairman of the commission. Thank you for joining us. We have one question from social media. Mr. Nicholas Maynard, he is asking whether there is an age limit for the Thorne Commission. The proposal would have been to use senior members from the government secondary schools, which would suggest an age of around 15 to 18 years old. However, as we would have acknowledged at the town hall that started at the garrison, there are young persons who have very strong and well-articulated opinions about how governance structures in Barbados should operate, and if their school believes strongly that they should be represented, that is something that the Thorne Commission would take into consideration. Any other questions from the audience or from social media? We'd be willing to take them at this time. I'm apologizing that we don't have any prizes to offer for the best questions, but we're hoping that you would be very excited about the prospect of having a People's Assembly in your community.
I would just like to ask the St. Lucie residents here if they believe that the parish is intimate enough and well connected enough that one assembly would suffice or would be ideal for St. Lucie. I think we would want to get the opinion of some parishes. We have said 2 assemblies. Some parishes we have said 3, like parishes like Christchurch, for example. St. Michael we have said 4. Some parishes we have said one parish-wide assembly, and St. Lucie is one of those. So it would be good if we could get some feedback from the St. Lucie residents here, if you agree with that concept.
The question that was asked was how were we able to determine the number of assemblies for each parish? We would have looked at the population density, and that was the basis. As St. Michael is the most dense parish, that is the reason why we would have selected more assemblies. However, if you believe that one is not enough, or St. Lucie could possibly merge with another parish, that we're open to suggestions as long as you have your reasons for why you would want to have it a particular way, and we have enough persons that have this particular feeling. We do not come from St. Lucie. Like, let me speak for myself. I do not come from St. Lucie, and I would not want to dictate to you what your people's assembly should look like. We would give what we would have proposed, but we think it's important to hear from the persons who live here what they would like that to look like, because it is for you. There any other questions? Or I should say, how do you feel about the emphasis on the people's assemblies being non-partisan? In other words, as little political influence as possible. Okay.
In response to the Deputy Chair's question about the number, whether St. Lucie should have only one assembly or not, and the answer to some extent was you looked at population density. I'm concerned, and I think I expressed this at the last meeting, about using population density, and that we might need to take into consideration access to, based on the available services. Because even although I'm living in St. Lucie, or let me put it this way, I live in St. Michael, but it can be very difficult for me to get to some parts of St. Michael, even with the available transportation. And I could imagine what it would be like in a rural parish like St. Philip, to be able to move around as freely as one would expect, that one could find one central place, unless, of course, the assembly is meeting not at one venue, but that it is a roving assembly, so that it would be able to move into specific areas and so mobilize the people in that area to come out and discuss the issue. But I think that we might need to look beyond just population density. For all the parishes, actually, or where you're placing the assemblies.
Thank you for your comments. We have another question from online, and this is from Philip Matthews. He's asking whether money will be placed every year to do projects such as bus shelters and sign renewals. This is part of the proposal. I would also at this time invite persons to visit the Thorne Commission on Local Governance Facebook page, where information on the proposed structure has been added for your benefit to review and for you to place your comments as to the areas that you would like to see amended, if any. Okay.
Good night,
Good night.
one and all. My name is Peter Phillips. I'm the Member of Parliament for the constituency. And for those of you who are here for the first time, I want to welcome you to St. Lucie, the most beautiful parish in Barbados. Now, I wish I had these documents to peruse them before in terms of the structure and so on. And the question was posed earlier in relation to whether one assembly would suffice. I would believe that without, not necessarily based on population density, but I would believe that for now, as a start, one would be good enough, bearing in mind that the numbers on each is about 20 for each assembly. The number of members, approximately 30.
Approximately 30 for each, so that would be a total of 620
Right,
members.
so St. Lucie would have 30 persons on their assembly.
Yes.
Right, they want to be absolutely clear on that. One of the things that concerned me though initially, I see here in the second to the last paragraph on page 1, it says elections can be organized by the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, which can publish the candidates' CVs. And candidates will address residents at a town hall meeting, etc. I am a bit concerned with that structure in terms of CVs, because there are good community people who understand and who are good at management. I heard the gentleman here say that St. Lucie is prominent in terms of the community independence celebration, but they also have persons who may not have the academic that we seem to be, because it tells me here to some extent that you might be focusing on that, and I hope that is not the case, because to publish a CV, it might disqualify that person in the eyes of John Public, because people have these certain levels of you judge persons and you put them in a particular bracket. I love what follows in terms of they will address residents, because in the absence of the CVs being published, I would make my judgment on who perhaps is best able to represent my interests on these assemblies based on what they present to me when they have to address the town hall meeting. I think that is a very excellent way of putting it. I'm not so much in support of the publishing of CVs, but this one with the addressing of the town hall meeting is something that I would give kudos to.
Mr. Phillips, would you mind if I give a brief response while you...
Certainly.
Yeah, so the idea of the CVs is not intended to be the kind of academic exercise that you would go when you are applying for a job. I see these CVs as saying, I have been a member of this community, I have been an organizer in the community, I captained the cricket team, I was a member of the Parish Independence Committee. Essentially, the CV would be an opportunity for you to set before your fellow constituents, your fellow members of the Assembly, what qualifies you to serve, to present yourselves to serve on the committee. So it is not intended to be an exercise where you judge a person in terms of an academic sense for qualification. It is basically presenting your credentials to serve in the community, and bear in mind that the ultimate judgment will be by your peers, the members of your community. And therefore, they will determine whether they want someone who can list a 10-page CV but has no connections in the community, or whether a person presents something that might be handwritten, but every person in that community knows that John Brown is there whenever there's something to represent that community. So that is the idea behind it.
Well, thank you very much for that clarification. You know, that does shed the kind of light that I would want to see in terms of these this election and so on. But we still bear in mind that people are people, and we always tend to be judgmental in that regard. But that is very good, because what I'm very good in terms of what you said, because I think that we should probably have somewhere, whether it's a form you have to fill out when you're making the application, to list service clubs or organizations where you would have served, something more like that, rather than just saying, if you have a CV, you can put it, if that's what you require. But I think that you should add lists of service clubs or areas you have served in during up to present, and the role that you would have served and the role that you would have served in as well. That because persons may tend to feel intimidated alone when you look at the word CV and say, me, I ain't went to secondary school, you know, I ain't got none there, because them for the big ups, you know. I think in the whole country.
Do you and the other members think it would be useful to give guidelines such as what my colleague would have suggested, so that persons will understand that it's not the traditional form of a CV that we're looking for, but persons who have a love for their community and the things that they have done that would show their fellow St. Lucie members that they have the parish's best interests at heart? That is something we can also take into consideration, so that persons would see up front that is nothing to be intimidated about when they see the word CV.
I would pause for now, and I would probably come back a bit later. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Before we go back to the social media queries, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to make a comment or share a question? Okay. In the meantime, there was a question as to whether there will be other parishes involved. Each parish will have at least one People's Assembly. The parishes that will have one, it has been proposed to be St. Lucie, St. Andrews, St. Joseph, St. John, and St. Thomas. The parishes that will have two, St. George, St. Peter, St. Philip, and St. James. Christ Church will have three, and St. Michael will have four. We will have town hall meetings for each proposed area, and you will see the information coming out on all of these town halls as we're able to confirm locations. At this time, the next town hall will be at Princess Margaret Secondary School in St. Philip, and pardon? Yes, no, not next week, Wednesday, the 27th of November, and the following Wednesday will be at the West Terrace Primary School. This information is all available on the Facebook page, so you can feel free to join the page, like the page, so that you can have all of that information and more available. I'm also seeing some comments with regards to specific areas such as road repairs, bus stops, and natural gas. This will be some of the things that will be discussed at your People's Assemblies. You, the persons for each parish, when you form your committees, will determine which areas are most significant for you given the budget that you will have to work with. So it will not be a case where someone from a government office dictates to you what is most important for your parish, but the persons that you've entrusted as your assembly members will be the ones that will take feedback from the community and determine if bus stops are the most important areas for St. Lucie, then yes, that's what we'll be focusing on. If community projects, are the most important: sports, road repairs, natural gas. Your People's Assembly, with the budget that you've been given, will be the ones to determine what is most important for your parish. Seeing another question from Adana Grandison. Would there be any training provided to individuals placed on the community well-being teams, given that there are special populations within the group, example, children and the elderly? That is something that we will take into consideration. If we believe that it would be best to have persons who would help to guide you as to how to make sure your assemblies are functioning as optimal as they should be, that is definitely something we could take into consideration, because we would not want one particular assembly to have an advantage over another because they don't have the expertise that would help them to maximize the potential of the assembly. Thank you for that suggestion.
While that question is being, or that other persons are considering their questions, it is interesting to reflect on that, because I've had the opportunity to live and work in many parts of the world. And maybe it's a bit of bias being a Barbadian, but I am really convinced that we have within the body of our society the skills and capacities to manage all of the issues that are down for consideration by the People's Assembly. I know that within St. Lucie, we have people who are teachers, people who are probably welfare officers, we have people who are counselors, we have people who work with churches and have the capacities to engage and work with people and understand people. We have persons who work across the public service. We have persons who, by virtue of their education or simple community mindedness, have the capacity to contribute in these ways. Now, it may well be, and it is a good suggestion, that at least some basic level of support and training in procedure may be necessary for the assemblies, particularly once they're getting off the ground. But I do not have any fear or concern whatsoever that in the Barbados I know, we have the capacity to deal with the issues that will present themselves before a People's Assembly for consideration. And I want to ask a question of you as residents of St. Lucie. Do you think that something like a People's Assembly, with no disrespect obviously to the Member of Parliament who is here, could be a feature that would help in responding to something like the recent floods, for example, that impacted on the parish so heavily? It is issues such as this where people who have the direct and personal experience either of dislocation, service that is not being delivered to the standard, or issues that are of concern for them, where these are issues that can be brought before something like a People's Assembly for consideration to demand answers either with respect to farmers who are impacted or dislocated, members of households, people who live close to roadways where the drainage is impacting on their households because it is not properly done and the water is running onto their property. Do you think that this is an issue that you, as members of the community, could hold and consider in something like a People's Assembly, and to help provide answers for yourselves and for the members of the community?
Good night. My
Good
name
night.
is Algernon Johnson. I want to ask 4 questions, and they will say, what is the role of local government? What type of local government we're going to have? What the powers of the local government will have, and what services will the local government provide?
Okay, as the Deputy Chair is indicating, the answers to a number of those questions are presented in the handout which is available. But I will just very quickly, if the Chair permits, just run through some of the possible answers to the questions. And I think, thank you for the question, because I think what you are pointing out is that we, the members of the commission, have to do a better job at presenting to the public the body of the proposals for the People's Assembly, so that people can come to these meetings with the knowledge of some of the questions that you're asking, and then be able to move from there with their own suggestions and recommendations. Yes, did you want to come back on something before?
No, just
Yeah,
in
okay.
case, yes, sir.
All right, so you asked about the role of local government, and the role as outlined here is basically to give two members of a geographic area, whether it be parish or part of a parish, to put in their hands the capacity to take responsibility for a range of issues that impact on their lives, mainly public services, but also the opportunity to contribute to the effective governance of the country. So the proposal goes deeper than simply coming together to discuss issues that affect you. It actually suggests that members of the Assembly can put to government issues that are concerning them that may require either legislative treatment or some other treatment by the government. So it is an opportunity, the role basically is an opportunity to take charge of affairs that immediately impact your life as a citizen or as a resident of that geographic area. That's the basic principle behind it. In terms of the type, the question you asked about the type of local government, basically what is being proposed here is an assembly made up of members of the community. Some will be voted for. They present themselves for election to the community in their own personal stead, rather than representing any particular interests. And aside from the ones who will be voted for, the proposal is that some members who will serve by virtue of being either a member of one of the schools, the secondary schools, or the university, so that you have a youth representation on the council. And then thirdly, some persons who may represent public sector agencies that are involved in service delivery will also be members. In terms of the powers they have, those are outlined there, but the powers will essentially be to make decisions and to effect planning around issues that come before the Assembly. It will not change the power and authority, obviously, of the state, of the government, because the government has the responsibility for things like making legislation, but the assemblies will have the power to say, this issue that is affecting or impacting this community should be responded to or dealt with in this particular way. And then finally, in terms of the services, the services cut across the range of public and social services, whether it be access to water, to the roads, access to things like health care, the range of public services that we as citizens pay our taxes for and basically are entitled to enjoy by virtue of being citizens of the country, to make sure that no one is disadvantaged and that those services are made available on the basis of need as expressed to the council.
So we get the local government, we expect to get a more efficient and a speedier process happening now?
I think a lot of whether it is more efficient and speedier will depend on the functioning of the assemblies. But yes, that would be my expectation, because you would not have to wait to go through the long bureaucratic process of something filtering up from the community through whatever mechanisms now exist and then filtering back down through the government agencies. The people's assemblies will have the capacity and power to present their concerns directly to these public service agencies. And that is actually written as part of the proposal, that if you have a problem with health care in your community, you could consult with the polyclinic, with the Minister of Health, and bring to their attention the concerns that you have and require that those concerns be addressed.
For example, our quality of our water in St. Lucie is horrible. I had to call the water right up to last night because the water is the color of the floor. I can't wash, I can't drink it, I'm paying a large water bill, and I have to buy water. That is not good enough. When you call, you get another pretty talk, but no action. They're not coming to flush the pipes, and when they do come, and you see what comes out, you can't believe this is what we have to deal with. So I wonder, with the assemblies, if we're going to get a process where we said we got to be calling, and the individual could make a complaint to the particular person, and they get a speedy response, because we're not getting a speedy response to what's happening. Like 2 days ago, the current off, water off, you look in the cave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if you got a pump and you got water, you can't pump the water because the current ain't working. So nothing can happen. Telephone going off. Everything is like, if you got a cell phone, the Lord help you.
Yeah.
And that is not good enough. We need, if this is going to happen, I want to see it happen in a real way. You understand me? In a real way. Because we in the North really getting it. Well, I mean, the see what happened on Saturday? 9 inches of rain, and St. Lucie the lockdown. Lockdown, you couldn't even get out. I used to go to classes, couldn't go, because you can't get out, right?
I'd like to also emphasize this is why it's important when you're electing the persons to represent you, that you elect persons you know can get the job done based on what they would have presented, as opposed to persons that you just like. Because you don't want a situation where you have 30 persons and there are 30 persons who may just want to make their professional background look a little bit better, or whatever the case may be. You want persons who will take action and not increase the level of bureaucracy and difficulties and frustrations that you will experience. Remember, this is in your hands, and it's your responsibility as well to make sure who represents you can do the job and do it well.
But no, I love the point that you made in terms of St. Lucie being on lockdown. It makes it more important to have persons at the community level with the skills to which you can immediately respond to issues that may be affecting you. Very often in natural disasters, we also must recognize that government agencies and the individuals who run these agencies, they also have families as well too. So when we as a community are cut off from other parts of the country, we must be able to mobilize our resources from within our own communities to respond to disasters and issues which would immediately affect us, because that we might very well be cut off from other parts of the island. So we're not only being a force to which will encourage government to respond, but we are hoping to empower communities with the necessary skills and abilities to respond immediately to issues that would affect them. And within St. Lucie, there are a number of resources and skilled people who we believe that can form into teams, even disaster response teams that can affect the necessary changes.
I agree in a sense, but over the weekend you saw what happened. So people came together and worked.
We did.
You understand? Because, as you said, the place was just lockdown, so we had to get together and put your hands to the plow. Right? If these things are going to be put together, we need, as you said, to get people that got local knowledge and can assist when you're doing these things, and not just, as you said, as the lady said, bring the fellow because he good. That's not good enough if this is going to be about, right? We need people that are willing to work, and people that when you call them, they answer the phones. You understand me? Because got a lot of people who's got phones, and it's only answer when it suits them, right? You understand? Excuse me.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
The purpose of this whole meeting is to try to identify the format that will become people's assemblies in the future.
We would have given a proposal, but we also want to have your input because, as we would have said, this is a proposal, but it must have the input of the persons that it is for. We don't believe that it should just be us putting something on you, but you must also have a say as to how you think it would best work, because I don't come from St. Lucie. I can't expect to know what people from St. Lucie would need or require.
No, I understand that, but the structure of your assembly is, you said 30 people?
30
I came in
people for
as-
each assembly,
As Mr.
and there are
Thorne
20
said,
assemblies in total.
I arrived a little bit late, so I
That's okay.
may have not heard some of this stuff. But I think 30 is a lot of people to start off with. To get 30 people together in Barbados is going to be a challenge.
Okay.
I think that number is too big to start off with,
This is specifically for St. Lucie or for?
specifically for the entire thing.
Okay.
Because I think for 30 people to actually communicate and be on the same page is asking a lot. I mean, Mr. Phillips would know he got 30 people right now in government. And I'm sure he can't communicate with all of them constantly.
What?
Okay? The other thing is how would the people's assemblies actually have authority in relation to the political structure that we have? Because, obviously the people's assemblies is going to have money, which is taxpayers' money. And they're going to have to get it from somewhere. So what ministry, or would that be the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Social Care, the Ministry of, or would it be from all the different ministries?
There will be a budget provided, and the funds that are used will be audited for sure.
Okay.
So there will,
Because I see a lot of, in terms of your budget for, and I don't know what your budget is going to be. I mean, are you going to give us like $25 million to spend in St. Lucie? Or $25,000 to spend in St. Lucie? Because it's going to make a huge difference in what we can achieve.
the exact amount of the budget has not been determined.
But no, I mean, but these considerations are, I think, as y'all go ahead in this endeavor.
What do you think would be an adequate budget?
Well, this is the thing. For me, I would say that the people's assemblies should propose projects or make proposals for their specific assembly area. But I think at the end of the time, there has to be a national consideration. Because when you make the national consideration, then in terms of what the finances are, the BERT program, and all the rest of it, you would say, well, yeah, these people in St. Philip want money for foolishness, but the people in St. Lucie want money for something real. So St. Lucie gets the money, and St. Philip, you go wait your turn.
That was actually a point that was raised at the Garrison Assembly, Townhall, apologies. It was a very similar point where, as you rightly said, the proposals that may come out of one parish may be, for lack of a better word, a bit more superficial, while other parishes might have very critical needs, and to give an equal budget to each parish, for one parish to use it for something not necessary, whereas another parish may have very critical areas that they need addressed. That's something that we said we would take into consideration because it is a very valid point. We don't want it to be a case where one parish is disadvantaged because they're smaller or they have a smaller budget when they have much more critical needs. So that will have to be taken into consideration as a whole as well.
Right, and you speak of needs, but it's not all about needs. It's about some wants as well. And potentially somewhere like St. Lucie, which is rather less developed than, let's say, Christchurch, might have a proposal or a project proposal
That helps to develop the profile
that
of St. Lucie.
might have a national profile even.
Yes.
And then Mr. Phillips would have to come and get involved and bring that to the cabinet, wouldn't he?
I think, just again with the permission of the chair, I think that you're raising some legitimate concerns. And let me say at the outset that we have not gotten, the commission has not gotten as far as a recommendation as the budget, because obviously that, that falls to the government in terms of issues of affordability and equity and all of those other considerations. So we have not gotten that far down the road. But I certainly, if I were making a recommendation to the government, I would want to avoid being prescriptive by saying you should have this or you should do this.
Right.
If the principle is that the people should have the power to decide, then the people should have the power to decide. And therefore, if a certain amount of resources is put in the hands of the assembly, then it is up to that assembly to make a determination in terms of the priorities, which ones should receive the resources that are made available. We will always have an equation that says the needs are greater than the resources available.
Yes,
that equation
I
will
agree.
always exist.
Yes.
And that is where prioritization comes in, and that is where the democratic principle of you're now, as a member of the community, having the choice as to where you spend those resources comes into being, as against those decisions being made outside. And let me just quote, again for the benefit of the entire audience, from a bit from the proposal, that through the enactment of legally binding regulations, the oversight committees, as part of the People's Assemblies, will have the power to carry out inspections of the relevant state agency, to receive complaints from the public, to request and be granted meetings with management of the state agency in order to have discussions about problems and complaints, to suggest remedies, to request and be granted follow-up meetings. The proposal is therefore, as my colleague here was saying about things like the water, you will have the capacity to call the water authority to account for the quality of delivery of service to your community. And the proposal is to have that enshrined in legislation to give the assemblies that power.
Apologies, I'd just like to at this time acknowledge the Honorable Minister Cynthia Ford for the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs. Thank you for your presence. And our committee member Sherwood McCaskey, thank you as well for being here. Could raise your hand so persons could see your face.
Yeah, so sorry, I just wanted to point out that because the question was raised about power.
Right, and I think that this People's Assembly thing potentially has the ability to create more confusion than solve any problems as well, depending on how you implement it. Because it's another layer of authority, let me put it that way, that somebody would have to go through to actually have a problem solved. Like in the case of the water here in St. Lucie, which I think everybody in St. Lucie buys water to drink because you can't even brush your teeth with it.
But you're saying that it will cause more problems. What is being done now?
Well, really and truly, as far as I see it, the solution to the St. Lucie water problem is that all the mains rusty and nasty and need to be replaced. Nothing changes that. So somebody got to make a decision to write a big check to change all the mains in St. Lucie.
Right.
That's the solution to the problem. Local assembly is not going to help that one bit.
Right.
Because at the end of the time, that is an infrastructure problem that needs to be fixed, in my opinion.
I see.
David, you don't agree?
He's shaking his head adamantly. Do you want to respond? You could use the microphone, please.
And let's not be afraid of this kind of exchange, because this is exactly what we are supposed to be doing.
Yes.
He is saying that as a member of the community, they understand the problem. So again, that's part of the value of the community governance structure, that the community governance structure consists of residents of the community who experience the problem, and so they have a deep understanding of it. But secondly, somebody, even if the solution is to get the water authority to change the pipes, somebody has to get on the case of the water authority to impress upon the water authority that the priority in terms of changing pipes is right up here in St. Lucie. That is what your assembly will do, because your assembly will have, by law, the right to call for meetings with the management of the water authority, right? To make this intervention on behalf of the people that it represents. So it can only help. It can only help. It can't do otherwise than but help to get the action that the people in the community like St. Lucie requires. We got to believe in ourselves. We have to believe in ourselves, you know. Empower the people. The assembly is to empower ordinary citizens by law, to give them that platform to truly represent their residents and to make the case on behalf of their residents.
I hope persons in the room are convinced that they have the power and the authority to lobby for these issues on the behalf of their communities.
Good night. My name is Pearson Springer. Just a few comments, maybe questions. Now, one of the first things that concerns me is that I note with interest that you are trying to set up an assembly that is not one that is set up with politicians, people who will support a particular party and that kind of thing. I want to say, though, that in desperate times, desperate things are going to happen. I also want to ask the question, what is the role then in St. Lucie, for example, where you're going to have, where you only have one representative, parliamentary representative? Where does his role begin and end as it relates to the establishment of this assembly? Because I can see that there are going to be times when the roles are going to clash. So where does the MP stand in this regard? And then my next question is that of accountability. When you have a situation where politics invades the committee, and it will, and money is being spent, who is the person that is going to say, let us pull it back? St. Lucie is very small, I caution you.
If I can respond, perhaps bravely. You said you, and you are trying to establish, but I will use the first person plural pronoun. We are trying to establish. This is something that is in the interest of all of us.
I stand corrected, sir.
It's not a correction. I was making the suggestion. So it is a proposal that we are putting on the table. I would like you to explain the rather cryptic statement that you made at the beginning. In desperate times, desperate things happen, because I'm not sure that everybody understands. I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to. So just to make sure that I answer, I would like you to explain.
There will be political infiltration, simply put.
Okay. All right. So it would be naive of anybody here, any adult here, to believe that if you have a forum which allows for power and decision making, that those people who like power will not seek to use it. It would be naive. I think what the designers and the framers of the proposal have tried to do is to try to insulate as best they can from the political infiltration, as you put it, of the assemblies, by making, one, the membership of those assemblies to be elected by their peers, that is, to be elected by the community, and therefore the persons will stand, as we said, in their own stead, not as members of any organization. You will put yourself as a potential representative or potential assembly person on your own merit. And the selection will be by your peers. If the peers are of a single political mind, then that will be the result. But if the peers are interested in ensuring that persons who go forward to represent them on the basis of their capacity and potential, then that is what you get. So in other words, Sugarloaf has a song, you get the politics, or you get the result you deserve. And he's speaking there about the fact that if people fail to act in their own interests, then other people will suborn and take that interest basically on their behalf. So we cannot give any guarantees. None of us who are here can give any guarantees that there will not be attempts of political influence on the assemblies. But I think the members of those assemblies and the leadership of those assemblies will have that largely in their own hands. And if we all, as members of Barbados and members of communities, make a determination that this is about our welfare, I'm speaking too much, I should really give the opportunity to. But if we determine that this should be about our welfare rather than about the politics that basically sometimes make things so messy, then I think that we will have it in our hands to make that the reality.
At this point, I would also like to add that was also a concern that I had when I was first asked to be a part of this commission. And I would have received advice from one of the senators in Trinidad because they have a similar structure there. And I wanted to find examples as to how they were able to make it work. And his statements were that exactly what you said, it happened. In some of the assemblies, persons with a political agenda took over. Mm-hmm. But for the communities who were determined to have persons who had the best interest of the community at heart, and the example he gave was Tobago, he said Tobago, as it stands right now, does not depend on government for anything. They run as an entity of their own steam. They are completely independent, and politicians cannot get to them at all. And ideally, that is what I would like for each parish, that they're not dependent on any politician or minister for anything, and they can run their own affairs and make their own decisions and directly consult for the needs of their communities without having to be dependent on any kind of political influence. That is ideally what I would like for us to get to, but he was very clear. It is completely up to the persons within the particular assemblies who they elect and who they put in charge of their affairs.
Understood.
Mrs. Springer, do you have a suggestion as to how we could approach and deal with this issue that you have flagged? Because it is a real issue.
Yeah, it is a very real issue. I'm not even sure that I have a solution for it because I know it can happen. Mm-hmm. I think, though, that the whole idea of having the process looked after by maybe the EBC may help to some extent, may help. Mm-hmm. But as long as there are people in a parish or a constituency, everybody's going to have some kind of bias regardless of how much we believe that we can have politics out of such a forum.
Okay, I want to ask a question, and I often keep asking it. What is so demonic about political infiltration? I mean, this is a democracy that we live in. Every 5 years, we go to the polls and we elect political parliamentary representative. I think the issue comes when we're looking at it from a partisan perspective, whether or not people are services are delivered on the basis of who you vote for as opposed to the need that is being addressed. There's nothing wrong with political, because this is the kind of society to which we live in. We are governed by politicians, but the issue becomes now when it is of a partisan nature. I mean, Mr. Phillips, you've elected Mr. Phillips, the people in St. Thomas has elected Minister Ford to serve as a political representative. That is the level of democracy that obtains in our society. So I often ask what is so demonic about political infiltration. And the challenge comes when it becomes partisan.
You answered the same question you asked. I just want to add to that to understand the depth of what we are saying here is to understand the politics in St. Lucie. I mean, I can play the political card and say that Mr. Phillips is the best thing that happened to St. Lucie since sliced bread was invented. I then asked the other question, though, where does the line, that dividing line, come between the role of the Member of Parliament and the committee?
Okay, so we have the chair of the commission here present who actually prepared, along with the deputy chair, a lot of the principles behind this proposal, and I will defer to these learned gentlemen, both attorneys at law, to respond to that particular question, which is a really important one.
Oh, my good schoolmates.
Oh, boy.
He was in first form with me. Yes, well, following on from Peter Skeet, the elected representative, the member of parliament for any constituency, any parish, has his power, has his role, and is to be respected. I would differ slightly from how my sister Crystal Howell put it. We expect people's assemblies to have control of a certain sphere of affairs, not to have total control, because there's a role, there's a sphere for the People's Assembly, and there's a sphere for the Member of Parliament. So obviously they're going to have a relationship. They both have different spheres, and both spheres are legitimate, but there are areas where they will come together, they will engage, and they will have a relationship. So for example, we say that we expect each People's Assembly to develop a community well-being team whose function it will be to, I'll read it from the concept paper, to carry out the function of developing a comprehensive community oversight and assistance program designed to ensure that children, elders, disabled persons, and needy residents of the Assembly area are all properly looked after, and that no one is permitted to fall through the proverbial cracks. But the concept paper also envisages that the community well-being team will liaise with the Member of Parliament of the Assembly area. In other words, that there must be a relationship between the two. So the Assembly will set up a broad-based community well-being team that will be perhaps even dozens of people that will be able to do work that one Member of Parliament alone cannot do, to make sure that nobody, no person in need falls through the cracks in the People's Assembly area. But it is expected that they will have a relationship with the Member of Parliament. Okay. Another function, we speak about the community forum. The community forum is where periodically the Assembly will stage a community forum where national issues are discussed, where ideas are generated for submission to Parliament, etc., where pending pieces of legislation are discussed. But again, it is expected, since those functions so directly relate to the functions of a Member of Parliament, that they will work together in terms of that function. So we would have to go through the different functions and to determine which of the functions will require the People's Assembly to engage or to have a relationship with the member of Parliament. And that is something that we need to calibrate. So bear in mind, this is just a proposal. All of the mechanics of this proposal have not been worked out yet. It is very correct to say that we have to work out the legitimate relationship between the People's Assembly and the Member of Parliament, and we have to calibrate it properly and correctly in a way that makes sense. But this is where the Commission needs the insight and the wisdom and the suggestions of our people. So, yeah, come with suggestions, and we will need the insight and the wisdom of the members of Parliament as well. They will have to have a say in this too, as to how we correctly calibrate the relationship between the People's Assembly and the Member of Parliament. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, this is a work in progress. There's none of us who is omniscient and we know everything. No. But we're going to work this out as a community. Together, we're going to work this out, and we're going to make sure we get the calibration right as to the correct relationship between the People's Assembly and the Member of Parliament. But ideally, it should be a system that actually helps the Member of Parliament to carry out the kind of constituency work that ideally he or she would really want to see carried out. So it should empower the Member of Parliament and make his or her work actually lighter, if we calibrate it correctly.
Did the chair want to add?
Thanks, Chair. Actually, David said about all of it, but I would confess that during our deliberations, the question, I may have raised the question as to whether we think that the parliamentary representative should sit on the Assembly. As David said, in working out this thing, that is a question that we may ask. Should he be there ex officio? Should he be there by virtue of his office? Or could he just turn up? And that is something, as David said, we want to know from the public. Mr. Phillips is here. Let us acknowledge Mr. Jordan as well. Mr. Jordan is here. Minister Ford is here. The two from the north, I don't know how they feel about it, what they feel should be their relationship with the People's Assembly. I know Mr. Jordan has spoken about this in Parliament from day one. And the question is, what should be that relationship, Chair? In the United States, for example, it is not entirely resolved, because in the United States, there is still a question as to whether the federal government has ultimate say within the states, or whether the state legislature, there's always that question as to which one is preeminent. So the question, even in the United States, has not been answered entirely. Perhaps Mr. Jordan and Mr. Phillips may wish to say what relationship they would want with an assembly here in the north.
Thank you,
Or give
Chairman.
it further thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Thorne, for saving me the Google search for which ministry.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Springer, for bringing an important issue to the attention of the commission as well.
Good evening, Ingrid King. I'm a resident of St. Lucie. I have a question as it relates to the interaction between the People's Assembly and the various ministries. Will there be a formal procedure in place? I know there was mention of persons hounding the various ministries in order to get things done, but I am thinking there should be some kind of service level agreements so that when you make a request, it is acknowledged within a certain amount of time, and then you are told the steps that will be taken, and there should be some agreement as to when the problem will be resolved, given the resources.
Okay. There was a question earlier, and it was also proposed by multiple persons online as to why there should be 30 persons. Now, a lot of the functions, as if you get a chance to peruse the proposal, there are a lot of different functions that are proposed for these assemblies. And yes, 10 functions. And with 30 persons, just to give some perspective, I am also a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados. And we have numerous committees that are responsible for different aspects of ICAB. And we have way more than 30 persons. And it never seems as though it's enough persons to carry the load of the work that's required, especially when you're talking about volunteers. Now, if we have proposed 10 functions and you have 30 persons, if you divided it approximately equally, that's 3 persons per function. Many of these functions are going to be meeting with persons who are in ministries. For example, with the education, it's proposed that the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training can consult with each assembly on school board appointments or to select an assembly member to sit on these said boards. The assembly member can also form a youth education and social development think tank to construct improvements. And you could see that alone may require a considerable lot of resources, and you don't want to take away from the opportunity to also focus on your water issues, on your road issues. So to tie back to the question that you would have had, yes, there will be meetings with different ministries, with different aspects within government, and potentially with different ministers. And you want to make sure you have as many persons as possible so that it would not be left to a few or select persons to then burn them out and make them feel overwhelmed with all of the responsibilities of the community because there are only 10 persons elected and you can only adequately manage, say, one function out of all the proposals, whereas another community or assembly has all of the persons that they would need with all of the energy to be able to pursue these different areas to build up their parish. So this is why we're really trying to encourage persons to come out in their numbers, because we would want you to, as a community, be able to take advantage of as many of these functions as possible, because at the end of the day, it is to improve your community.
While the next speaker comes with a question, I want to acknowledge Ms. King's question and suggestion of a service level agreement, which I think is an excellent one between ministries, because I think if you're looking to deliver quality service, that is one approach that has considerable merit. And just to let persons here know that your suggestions and comments are being recorded. We have some rapporteurs who have been basically provided through the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, under whose responsibility the consultations sit, who are recording faithfully the contributions that are made so that they are not lost and they will be brought to bear on our deliberations at the end.
Good evening. Valis Kadagan from St. Swithin's Church. Even though I embrace warmly the concept of local governance, my question is, what role or part is expected of the church in this local governance, as we constantly see an erosion of our moral values throughout Barbados? Money cannot restore it. Projects cannot restore it. It must go deeper than that. And if we want to function at our maximum, the church must be involved. The church must come to the front, and the church must lead in your deliberations. I'm not telling you that the church wants to take over your governance, but at least involve the churches as we try to restore the moral fabric in each parish, crime throughout Barbados. all thoughts of deviant behavior. Money cannot do that. The churches plus you must come together and work to restore what we were accustomed to in the 70s and 80s.
Thank you for your contribution. I am very happy that there are persons from the religious community who have stepped forward, because it is critical that all aspects of the community are involved, and the church is one area where the very nature of it is to take care of the poor, the orphan, the disadvantaged, and that is a huge part of the proposal for the People's Assemblies. Therefore, it is of high importance that persons in the church who would already have that spirit of helping those persons are actively involved and can have an elevated role in making sure that those persons they already would hopefully have in their communities have an eye for are not left out, they're not disadvantaged, and that their voices are heard. Go ahead.
I just want to say, and Mr. Thorne will recall, that we had precisely this discussion when we were thinking about the content of the People's Assembly. And the document that has been handed out is the précis of the overall concept. So some details have been left out of that particular document. I have, for example, here, the longer version of the concept paper. And in the longer version of the concept paper, you will see that it is being proposed that just as certain public officers should be, by virtue of office, members of the People's Assembly, it was also felt that each assembly should have members of the church on the assembly. But we didn't want any particular denomination to be prioritized over others. And so we felt that we would need to have a multi-faith religious association bringing together all the denominations to help determine selecting representatives of the church to be on each People's Assembly. So we have taken that on board. But again, that's a proposal, and that's for discussion, for further fleshing out. But the people who put together the proposal felt that the church should be represented on each People's Assembly.
Good evening, Winfield King. On the question of the concept paper, the enlarged concept paper, would the members or the persons here be able to get access to this?
The summarized concept paper is available on... Yes. That is available on the Facebook page. I will have to get back to you in terms of if you want to have access to the longer page, the most appropriate forum, because as you will be aware, social media tends to support smaller bite-sized functions, but to be able to get it out to a wide audience as opposed to, because we do not have a website set up as yet, until we have that formalization where we have a website so that the longer concept paper can be accessible. For now, we have made the summary available on social media.
Thanks for the response, but you see, I've had a number of responses from David, I'll call you David, that speaks to things that have already been discussed within the concept paper, and I would have been happy to have it before tonight, so I could have reviewed it and maybe come with a few more things, and maybe have wider discussions in the community, so that we can present or discuss it or present it even further. The question here is the sphere of influence of the assembly, and I think that that's something that we need to really
be clear about the clash between not only the potential clash not only between the Assembly and the Member of Parliament, but the Assembly and wider government. We are at the situation now where, based on the current political situation, it may be a lot more even. We need to look at the possibility of things changing long term. The rule that you put in place now should be able to span across all potential issues or potential scenarios down the road. And I would, without saying that, it would mean changes in government, etc. When you look at something like the so-called U.S. Constitution and how that is used over time to set guidelines as to exactly how people should govern, or how the society should be governed. And the last question, the recommendation that I would make is that, having gone through the assemblies in that we are second in terms of the meetings that we have.
So far, yes.
You may want to come back, have it, or if not come back to St. Lucie, come back to the north of Barbados with enough time and with enough additional information that we can study it carefully and therefore have wider input, because the buy-in at that time may save the viability of the assemblies long term. If the people are not really interested in it and not bought into it, I think, no, you know this. It's not going to go anywhere. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. King. And again, just a quick comment while the next speaker comes to the microphone. Excellent suggestions, and I think I acknowledged at the very beginning that we as a commission have to do better in terms of putting the information available to the public. There are fora, and I think my colleague, Mr. Comajon, just made a suggestion from one of the members of the gathering here, that the Government Information Service, and indeed perhaps even the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, under whose auspices the Commission falls, do have websites or access to websites where this information can be published, so that at least those people who have access to the internet could read it. It is not beyond us to have, coming down to the end, and you suggested that we may want to come back, it is not beyond us to have a full version of the document available at places like post offices and so on that people can go to and look at as well. All of those are things within our compass, and thank you for the suggestion of making these more available.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Monique James, Youth Commissioner. First of all, I want to say this is a lovely initiative. I welcome such an initiative because I believe that people need to become more involved in what happens in their community and decisions that impact upon their daily lives. My only thing is for this is that, not to say, I think people need to understand is not to come and work against government, but to support central government. That's always see how such an initiative can work. Because similar to what the young man said about Saturday, I know that the Member of Parliament would have spent a whole day in the parish. And I'm saying that if we have such a committee in place, it will make one-man job easier. So for me, I welcome this initiative in terms of working to support what is already in place with the Member of Parliament, but also to create a forum where we are aware always of what's happening in the community. We have a lot of, my only down thing with this is to make sure that they're not, all the government services, community development, I realize youth affairs was not mentioned, but the youth affairs, the youth development program, NCF, National Sports Council, all these government agencies and welfare department, which already give services and have a welfare officer for St. Lucie. There's a community development officer. I see it here. Ain't my one. See, so I felt kind of left out. But felt a little left out knowing I worked so hard in St. Lucie.
If it makes you feel any better, the original document listed, I think,
he just said
must have been every single one.
I don't need the document to tell everybody in St. Lucie knows me, so I don't mind. But what I just want to say is that to make sure that the services that the assemblies have in place, that it will work alongside what is said here, and that people will not become very territorial. And I think that's one of the things that could be one of the hindrances or stumbling blocks. You know, we have this person might think, oh, they not put the assemblies in place to take away my job, but that they have a serious meetings with all the established ministries, persons understanding. And I think once everyone understands their role, and roles will overlap at some point, but it's just to serve your parish and your constituency. And as was mentioned, 30 people will have, is a big group, but when you broke it down, you have 10 different areas to start to work upon and focus upon. It makes it easier. But people must be, I just hoping that when it's time for selection, that people who generally have community development and your parish at heart will be the ones that are placed on committees. Because I think not just, well, elected, serve, whatever the position may be, that people always become distracted by, and power. And then people, and they have to say that, then like for a number of years, St. Lucie always have to suffer. But I love this because it gives power back to people, and that is what is needed. We need to help ourselves to rise again. We can't depend on central government to do it all. So I love this part, because then you will be able to tap into the masons, the carpenters. When you road bridge, we can call our laborers in our community. Everybody will come out and work to help get the country and the parish back up and functioning. So I welcome it. I just hope that everybody will be briefed on their roles, and that they will understand and appreciate when rules do overlap, but it's still for the betterment of the particular constituency.
Before you go, a quick question for you. Would you be interested in being elected for one of these assemblies?
Oh, yeah, sure. Pardon?
He used a very fancy term.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, because I already have a position in government already. But I've been working. It's no problem. Anything in St. Lucie.
I'm only 30 members may seem to be a lot, but we are hoping to capture as wide as possible a section of the public. The gentleman from the church made reference to the role the church has to play, but we are also looking to capture those marginalized young people on the block as well too, because they too have a voice to be heard as far as determining how their own communities should be run.
You see, 1 down, 29 more to go.
I just have a question.
Come forward.
Oh, I'm Carl St. John, by the way. Like, just sitting here and listening, I'm getting a sense of that the members of the People's Assembly could be very, very busy in terms of, so how much time do you guys envisage being on the assembly would take up in a human being's life?
You want me to be honest?
Is it a voluntary position? Are you volunteering?
It's a volunteer effort.
So you're volunteering for it.
So it's similar to how persons volunteer for the church, volunteer for Rotary, volunteer for any other community-based endeavor. North
Stars Cricket Club.
There you go. And each volunteer effort can take up, some of them take up a considerable amount of time, and there are others where you just have to come to a meeting and make a few decisions and have a bit of input. It depends on the area that you would like to contribute, how much work is associated. So I would imagine if you were on the committee responsible for the water issues, you may have a bit more work than the persons who may decide that bus stops in the community have to be improved. It just depends on where you're volunteering and how critical that area is based on the decisions that were made by your particular assembly. So I can't say it would take half an hour of your time every day, or.
But no, I mean, in terms of what you all been speaking about here this evening, it seems to me that a considerable amount of time would go in to being a member of the People's Assembly. I'm sure that Mr. Phillips and Mr. Jordan and the other members of Parliament are constantly being bombarded by people in their constituencies for whatever reason.
If your assembly...
And if you're on an assembly, then you would take some of that, you would pick up some of their slack, right? So potentially, this People's Assembly could become a long-term commitment to, I mean, like almost a full-time job.
No, well, what I would suggest, if you have an assembly and they have determined that you have X number of persons who have, to be honest, they have to be honest about how much time they have to contribute. If you know that you only have persons who can volunteer once a month, you will have to make sure that the projects that you are taking on align with the time commitments that the persons in your assembly can volunteer.
Remember my friend over here, Nancy David, said he wants somebody to answer the phone.
I didn't hear the last part, sorry?
He can need somebody that can answer the phone, right? Yeah, come on.
The assemblies are going to be able to co-opt residents from the community to assist. For example, the community well-being team. Obviously, the community well-being team that is going to spread out across the assembly area to ensure that people are properly taken care of, people in need, no one is permitted to fall through the cracks. Obviously, they're going to co-opt residents of the community onto that team. And we should not have any fear about enlarging the numbers. In fact, our fear should be just the opposite, about reducing numbers. The principle here should be the more the merrier, the more the better, because it's all about involving citizens in the governance of their own community and getting them engaged. So some of the committees that will be set up, the Assembly will be able to co-opt persons from the community who wish to come and help in that particular area. So there should be enough hands available that no particular person is totally burdened down with working with the Assembly's work. But I noticed that some of the questions you've been getting from social media seem to be suggesting that the assemblies are too large and they should be smaller. No, it's a voluntary thing. So if people are willing to volunteer and to come on board and to help shoulder the load to help their community, that is to be welcomed. That is to be welcomed. So I don't think we need fear that any one member is going to be overburdened. The idea is that there'll be more than enough hands to share the load.
Okay, Mr. St. John, thank you for your comment as well about the time commitment, because it is a legitimate concern as well. And I know that a number of people here have raised very, very real issues. People obviously have experience in the operations of these things, because some of the questions and issues that people have flagged are really important issues for the Commission to go back and consider, because I think it might have been said earlier, but to emphasize that what we are conceptualizing is a volunteer people's assemblies, that this will not be a paid position. The idea is that you're working in your own self-interest. And this issue about people being given money to look after their own interests is something that we have moved basically into in Barbados, and it's something that we probably need to leave behind.
Good evening, Hans Williams. I'm glad you mentioned on your last point that fees is not paid for this volunteer work, because I believe one should have a love for the community, love for the parish that one lives in. We depend on ministers as soon as we got a problem just to give them a call to solve one's problem. Water brown, let me call the minister. Roads damaged, let me call the minister. There's certain things we obviously cannot do on our own that we will need to call the minister. However, there are things that we can do within ourselves. I find that in Barbados, everybody has an opinion, but they do not take initiative to do. Also, in regards to the committee, going back to the point I made about the one loving the community, or for broader, loving Barbados, loving people as a whole, that person elected, and Miss James, I really would love Miss James if she ever get there, to be the one, because she is someone who really loves the community, not just the old and the young, as you know, she loves the young, but it would help us to develop the youth and the structure and some of the aspects of what is happening in Barbados. As I said, we're depending on Minister Phillips, Minister Jordan, Ms. Ford, Mr. Thorne, Mr. Commercion, and those of Parliament. But if we could empower ourselves and put in 30 members, I think that's still too short, because we have 30 members in Parliament, and we still think it ain't enough. So 30 members in this group, and under links for each member, because it's volunteer. We got enough people alongside the paling, smoking, contraband. Let me pull some of them off the road. Get them to really help the community. Check on Ernest, we call some old name or something, but to help them out. The bushing program, we had water problems. But we can see everybody say, oh, we can't go to St. Lucie, but how many help to clear the area around them? The first thing they're going to do, they're going to call Mr. Phillips. And if they can't find it, they call the permanent secretary, not the permanent secretary, the permanent assistant. And as soon as it's doing the way, we talk up to May 24th, is May 25th, the election was May 25th? 24th? God help me, I'm getting old now. But we wait until we got the power of the X, but we ain't got no power of our own self. So we really need, I'm sorry that this forum is not bigger than it actually is. And I analyzed it for myself, within my heart, and I've seen that after election day, when we call the forums for people to really get community-based, is always a drawn back. But I was one who went when the new government was being sworn in. And if you could see the amount of people up there, and the Prime Minister said, many hands make light work, the first thing out to everybody, but nobody is doing anything within the community to make it light. Not enough. And then, but let me stand corrected by you for saying not enough. I say nobody, because we waited for 30 people. And it's not right. Another point that I want to raise is, and as you said, the time. Because if somebody can only commit 2 hours or 8 hours or a day that I'm off, the person really can't do too much. If somebody know you got Broomfield, got an issue, and he can only do that when he off, to call the water authority. How about if he can only call water authority one day, what's going to happen on a situation of somebody in Clinkits, somebody up Coves Bay? So we need someone who would have adequate time. Don't just pick someone with the assessment of knowing the person will have time, they will put enough effort, and they will have enough love for the community, and as I said, Barbados on a whole. That is my personal assessment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I personally appreciate them a great deal, because when you put forward things like this, you hear a lot of negativity. And the reality is, if you believe it won't work, it won't. When persons are ill, many times when they believe they will not get better, they don't. And even though believing in this working is not a guarantee for it to work, believing that it won't work is a guarantee for it to fail. So having the enthusiasm and the encouragement from persons to at least try is very encouraging to see that this will become a reality, because I personally am hoping that the community spirit will be something that is prevalent in Barbados and not just dependent on the religious community to have that volunteer spirit or particular volunteer groups such as Rotary, but for Barbadians in general to get back to that place where I can remember when I was young, where you could depend on your neighbors to help you. Sorry, you got me thinking I'm not young anymore. When I was younger, that you could depend on your neighbors to be there for you if your community had a problem. And I myself am a part of the society that has moved away from that, and I am looking forward to this assembly bringing us back to that place where we can have that community spirit built back in cooperation with government entities.
Monique James again. I was to mention this earlier. I know we said 20 persons and we're all 30 and 20
assemblies, 30 persons.
30
each.
persons, all volunteers. But as I was sitting there having a little discussion with two friends, and this gentleman here talked to me, but he listening to me. I think it still needs to have more structure. You need to have at least an admin officer, someone who will be able to collate all the information and pull the stuff together with all the list of volunteers in the different categories and positions in the community. You would need to, I think it needs to have at least an executive, a main body of at least 10, and then have all these subcommittees who will report then to the head body in terms of structure, because having 30 people come in and meet all the time and everyone reporting, and then they should have a set place in the location so everyone in St. Lucie will know this is where the office of the assemblies will be, and we can call this number. So if they're all volunteers, people have jobs. So if we have something that happened between 8 to 4 while I'm at work, how would they be able to reach someone? Similar to what the gentleman said, they're all volunteers. You will have their own personal cell phones. I know we have to give back, but we have to still bear in mind that we have their own personal lives, and we're going to give a certain amount. So I still think that there should be a set office to which, I don't know if that is part of the plan or if it's in document, you know. But if they should have an office and at least an admin assistant who's responsible for putting stuff together. Yes, we can have, or even if you have, university students have to give back their 150, but have somebody who will constantly be present, even if it's still volunteerism, to manage the administrative and the clerical part of the assembly. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. James. That's an excellent suggestion again, that, and obviously something that the commission would have considered, that you cannot have an assembly that is expected to take on the range of responsibilities that we have outlined without having some level of administrative support. And that level of administrative support will have to be at least, semi-permanent, that you will have to have some kind of structured administrative support for the assemblies to function. Well, thank you for the suggestion.
I would like to suggest that that person should be the member of parliament office, or his constituency office, or
Oh, you would like them to be based at the constituency office?
Just to bear in mind, however, that, and yeah, I heard the suggestion, but to bear in mind that the people's assemblies are not going to be constituency based. So they will, for example, be, let's say St. Michael. I don't even know how many constituencies St. Michael have, but there will be 4 assemblies. Right, so there will be 4 assemblies. So you will not have a perfect alignment between constituency and assembly. And I think that that's a good thing. It is one of the things that will help protect the assembly. But I think the suggestion of perhaps some of the administrative support coming through the parliamentary representative or representatives is one that the commission will certainly consider.
fact of having no affiliation to a political party. Because there might be persons, our member of parliament is very pushable with anyone and everyone. But at the end of the day, we still got to bear in mind that this is supposed to be a body that creates a forum for all persons in a parish or constituency. And when we say, okay, you can call the constituency office at such and such, this person will see it as a political thing and not necessarily having no transparency. Just say, I think it should have something separate and distinct, but you still maintain the working relationship with the member of parliament.
We appreciate your comments with the separation of the assemblies from the constituency to negate the impression that it would be something political. Yes, the time has flown very quickly. We have approximately 5 more minutes left. So if there's anyone that would like to squeeze in any last questions, I would invite you to take this time, and we definitely do take the suggestion that we may have to come back. You wanted to answer a question? The community center. Yeah. Thanks for that suggestion. That would definitely be taken into consideration. Anyone on my left, my right, my in front, no one behind, that would like to give any last comments?
I would have introduced myself already, and I'm just here to express my appreciation for having this forum in St. Lucie. Very often, everything stops in terms of town hall meetings by my good friend and neighbor in St. Peter. But I'm happy to see that you're changing that. And this facility is a lovely facility, so we are inviting you to have a lot more of these sessions here. And I told my colleague Ralph, when he asked me if it was, he think it was a good, he was told that it's not the best location. I told him we had a People's Assembly here already. We had a People's Assembly right at this school pre-election. When we did a series of People's Assemblies, one was held here. But more importantly, the question was put as to how a member of parliament would feel in terms of the relationship with the assembly. There must be a role, in my view, for the member of parliament. There must be balance as well, because as I mentioned to my colleague, Minister Jordan, if proposed by the assembly that you do X road or a Y project and so on, and that is not necessarily what the political directorate would want or the MP would want in terms of priority, because there has to be priority. Maybe some persons would suggest, I think that this particular thing we should do at this point in time. But for the member of parliament, it is something different based on the fact that he or she may have more information or more knowledge in relation to that what is happening in the particular parish. You could get a situation where if it comes to and the member of parliament has a say and he says, no, I don't think this, then that creates issues issues with the assembly, because the assembly would then feel overpowered, overruled. Well, what is my role here? We say we should have this, and the MP says so and so, and if it happens once, you may get away with it. If it happens 2 or 3 times, then you have problems, because the assembly then feels that it is now worth nothing, because everything we propose, the MP shut it down. Those are considerations that we have to make, but I do believe that there must be some sort of relationship, and it must be a case where you work, there must be collaborative effort in the interest of the particular parish. And I can say, in as long as I have the opportunity to be here, you know, what's best for St. Lucie is what's good enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
I'm speaking partially only because, no, not because I'm a tall man, but because Member of Parliament Philip spoke, and I tell my people in St. Peter that when I'm in St. Peter, I'm not a minister, I'm an MP. Now, I agree with Peter that the relationship, and I don't have a firm view as to what that relationship should look like. But I think as a democracy deepens, that we, politicians, those elected to represent constituencies, are going to have to face a reality that I know happens in the American system, where, for example, you can have a presidential candidate winning the popular vote and somebody who is opposed to him philosophically wins the same state's vote. Now, that can be a recipe for gridlock and deadlock. And we are going to have to use the examples that we see around us, developed countries, developing countries. As a matter of fact, sometimes we call them developed countries, but the fact that they have some of these issues mean that they're still developing. But some of these larger countries, we're going to have to look at what causes the challenges and try to work through the structure that we're going to create. That said, Prime Minister often says that the striving for perfection is, I think, a hindrance to development, or worse to that effect. And I'm not saying that we should wait until we get a perfect solution, but we have to be mindful that we don't want to have a situation where there is war. Because war, we are trying to create a democratic construct, something to deepen democracy, deepen participation by ordinary people. And if the preoccupation is war, that is either the MP fighting against the People's Assembly or the People's Assembly fighting against the MP, then that which we had set out to establish will not materialize. And so we have to be very careful. I don't like things like veto powers. I think that is, in some cases, I don't know if I call the word right, but antithetical to, or in opposition to a deepening of democracy. We've seen it misused. UN Security Council is a classic example where right doing is sometimes overpowered by those who have the power and the might. I believe that in the discussion, that's the reason why I didn't really intend to say anything, because for me, this is a listening exercise. I believe that there is wisdom in the minds of the people. And I believe that in the process of these discussions, the structure, the shape, I heard somebody use the word, the shape and the structure is going to emerge as a result of all the discussions. I still believe in the dialectical method. One of those principles is the unity and struggle of opposites. And I believe that out of all this discussion, we will get that format. I support the separation from the political representative because, as Monique said, there are, and I had this with my parish organizing committee for Regathering 2020. I try not to hold meetings for the parish organizing committee at the constituency office because there are people who are on that committee who I have asked to be on the committee, who I know did not vote for me, who may have actually voted against me. But my role, once I'm elected, is to represent the entire constituency. My branch interested in Labour Party. I'm the representative for the entire constituency. And I believe that we have to separate the idea of the using community centers is a good one, And that may actually have the additional benefit of bringing activity back to community centers. We have community centers now that are lying dormant. Windows break out one a week, and the activity that you would have known from years gone by that used to happen at community centers isn't happening anymore. And I think if there was something that was pulling people to the locations, then we may see a resurgence of activity in those locations. And that would be a benefit over and above just having the People's Assembly there and people coming to meet, but it now becoming a focal point for developmental activity in the parish. And I think that will start, well, at least will help to change the minds or to reorient the minds of parishioners that this is a place for me. This is a place for ordinary people. This is a place where development can happen, whether it is bringing an issue to the People's Assembly or whether it is now thinking about starting some kind of class in that space. And I think those are some of the benefits. Now, I also want to, I don't often go on the defensive, but I think I need to say, with the best will in the world, no one person or few people, I want to support Ambassador's comment about widening the participation. No one person, and the reason why I mention defensive is because I'm now speaking as a politician with a few months of experience. So let me give the experience first. I think that will explain my situation. I heard some of my colleagues talking about personal assistance. And I thought, my background is business. I thought, that is politicians trying to find a job for somebody. That was my position. So I didn't have a personal assistant. I had two phones because I had my work phone and I had a phone that I was using so as not to use my work cell phone. I was able to keep the work cell phone, so I had two phones. And I realized after about 2 or 3 weeks that when you have 200 messages and a full-time job trying to chase down public servants with a boss, a prime minister, who is telling you to roll up your sleeves because you're not getting a production from them, so you got to do a lot of stuff yourself, I was not able to manage that. It was just impossible. I have a wife and I have 2 daughters. And I have told St. Peter that I am breaking up my family for nothing, including politics. Now, that meant that I had to find a way to manage the situation because I cannot just say, well, I'm done with the people. I was elected because I wanted to be elected to serve people. So I had to give her my cell phone. Now, in the intervening period, I had a situation where people were saying they couldn't get a hold of me because you're in meetings all day. I've been in meetings since 9 o'clock. I stopped at home for 2 minutes, and that was to take out my bag because I didn't want to keep it just in case something happened. And I came straight here. I ate my lunch on the road after I left my office going to another meeting. Anyway, all that to say, in order to be effective in delivering service to people, there has to be a broadening of the load. The load has to be spread some more. The idea that a few people, well, first of all, this concept moves away from having one person having to respond. I have 8,000, over almost 9,000 constituents. Now, if only 5% of those call me, it is unmanageable. And every person is an individual. So when an individual can't get hold of me, it means that I now big up and I'm not responding. Now, each of the other 200 are saying the same thing. Then 50 more I may get a chance to respond to. If we are to avoid the feeling that people get, that they get with politicians, that they're not responding, if we are to avoid that with the People's Assemblies, it means that we have to really spread the load, really spread it, especially given that all these people have full-time jobs, or will have, or could have full-time jobs. So as not to create a situation where you turn people off almost immediately as you launch, from engaging because they say, well, look, I tried to get through, nothing happening, and I told somebody this 2 months ago, still nothing happens. We have to make sure that the load is spread enough. Now, I also finally want to say that somebody mentioned service level agreements.
Yes.
I think it was service level agreements, along with making sure that this idea is not destroyed upon birth, has to be, and I'm not speaking to myself and to Minister Phillips and Ford and Thorne, along with this has to be some serious work in the public service of Barbados. I spend hours every day hearing, and we had a meeting today where we heard another complaint. People trying to get through to government departments. I just came from hearing another long story being pushed around, but I don't know, talk to this person, talk to that person, and you just keep moving. Volunteers who don't have, or who public servants don't feel have, let's say local standing, have some power, may not get listened to. Mm-hmm. So you may have a person calling saying, well, I'm the chair of the People's Assembly. Now, you have to make the assumption that that title
carries weight.
Carries some kind of weight with the person who you're speaking to on the phone. Mm-hmm. If they believe it has no weight, when they find out, when some of them, I don't want to say all, when some of them find out that you're a volunteer, then you get treated, you might get treated just like any other ordinary citizen. And so we have, at the same time that this is being presented to the public, there has to be a concerted effort to have the public service responsive. Now, I told that same group that Minister Ford and I met with, the public service is like an aircraft carrier. We want it to be a jet ski. A jet ski will never be an aircraft carrier. It will take much longer to turn. My suggestion, this is still my final point, my suggestion is that, but politicians always talk too much. My suggestion is that for these service level agreements to work, we're going to need to have, while we work to change the psyche and everything of the public service, identify some decent, hard-working, well-meaning people in the service, in particular departments, mm-hmm. that can act as liaison mm-hmm. for the People's Assembly chairs. A couple of people in every department or ministry, especially the ones that we're focusing on in those 10 areas, who the person knows, I can call this person.
And this person will
assist. They may not be in a position to make the decision you want or to send the garbage truck, as the case may be, but that person will need to function as the go-to person who says, all right, let me speak to whoever, and that person does the running around within the ministry and then gets back to the person of the People's Assembly. I know there's also a proposal that representation from some of those departments sit on the Assembly as ex officio. Now, if that person is going to be the person, then they will need to understand that they will need to be doing some running around. That will mean that within the structure of the government department, it will have to be understood that that individual is going to be spending either most or all of their time facilitating the work of the Assembly. That has budgetary implications. It means that they're pulled out from some other substantive function, and they're going to be doing this coordinating, running around kind of role, trying to get action. Mm-hmm. Because only action is going to make this credible. People are going to need to see results. If there are no results, then we could as well just keep bombarding the MP. Because we're going to get just the same low level of response is what some people may actually say. So I just thought I would add those observations and thoughts to the discussion.
We appreciate your input, and I would like to say, based on the last comment that you would have made, that I hope you appreciate how much of an interest the minister would have in it working so that he is not as bombarded as he usually is. I know. And in response to Phillips's comments in terms of the minister potentially having to veto decisions made by the People's Assemblies, I would say, given the experience, my personal experience for 14 years working as an auditor, which is usually seen as an adversarial role, my results usually come from being cooperative with the persons and having a discussion as to how we can collaborate and to explain why something is the way that it is and to find out what alternatives we can have to make sure that everybody gets what they need and understands what is happening. That has worked for me personally, and I know I've been accused of oversimplifying things, but I have run out of time to go any further into detail. I have promised to finish at 9, and I thank you all for being here, for the input that you would have given, and for staying past the promised 9 o'clock time. We do apologize for that, but we really wanted to make sure that everyone is heard, and we do believe that ministers are people too. So with that said, if I have any final comments from my colleagues from the commission.
Thank you all for some really insightful comments and suggestions, and thank you for your participation tonight.
A reminder that the next assembly is not next week, Wednesday, but the following Wednesday at the Princess Margaret School. Thank you.